Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 20. Kelly. What would you do if your mentor of 11 years betrayed you? The man who taught me everything I know about this industry, the one who wrote my first promotion recommendation, turned me into a scapegoat for his own failures. Right in front of 25 people. That is exactly what happened to me that day. He looked me in the eye and said, I was the reason the Henderson account collapsed. In that conference room, my name, my reputation, my 11 years of dedicated work, all of it was thrown in the trash. I looked at his face, searching for some trace of the mentor who once stayed late helping me understand financial modeling. There was nothing behind his eyes. The man I thought I knew had simply vanished. Just cold calculation and the unmistakable relief of someone passing blame to a convenient target. But here is the thing about mentors who betray your trust. They forget that the person they trained knows exactly how they operate, the behavioral patterns, the attention to detail, the meticulous documentation they demanded. And I had been documenting everything just as he taught me, for exactly 8 months. Here is what happened. I remember every detail of the first day I met Victor Ashworth. It was a Tuesday in March, 11 years ago, and I was 26 years old. Fresh out of my MBA program at Columbia, convinced I knew everything about management consulting. I had graduated with honors, won first place in every case study competition, completed internships at 2 prestigious firms. I thought I was ready for anything the industry could throw at me, but I had no real experience. Victor changed that completely. He was a principal consultant at Callahan Partners, one of the most respected boutique consulting firms in Manhattan. Their offices occupied the 27th floor of a glass tower in Tribeca. Just being there made you feel like you must have accomplished something. Would you not be impressed by a reception area greeting you with a view of the Hudson River? Floor-to-ceiling windows, a quiet elegance where success seemed embedded into every surface. All my efforts had finally paid off. Walking through those doors for the first time, I felt like I was stepping into the future I had always imagined for myself. I was finally in the kind of place where serious people did serious work and built careers that actually mattered in the world. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times during business school. The reality was even better than the fantasy. Victor interviewed me himself. Most senior consultants would delegate that task to junior partners or HR coordinators, but he did not. He sat across from me in a small conference room with walls lined with framed client testimonials. No notes, no laptop. His determined eye contact told me he did not need them. The questions he asked made me think harder than any case study ever had. He asked about my failures. He asked about decisions I regretted. He asked what I would do if I discovered a client was lying to me. None of my prepared standard answers could respond to any of these questions. All my memorized responses fell apart, and I was flustered. Finally, he said, leaning back with an expression I could not quite read, "You are smart." But smart is not enough here. Half the people who walk through those doors are smart. The question is whether you are willing to be uncomfortable, whether you can keep working even when you cannot see the solutions. I told him yes without hesitation. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. He hired me that afternoon. It was not the usual feeling of success because I had been confused by Victor's questions. Yet I walked out of that building feeling like I had just been handed the keys to everything I had ever wanted. I called my mother from the sidewalk. Time seemed to stop as strangers rushed past me on their way to somewhere else, and I was crying tears of joy. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere that matched my ambition. I learned what a mentor should be from Victor. For the first 3 years, he taught me everything from scratch. How to read a room before speaking, how to notice subtle shifts in body language, how to structure proposals that clients could not refuse, how to build arguments they could not object to. When I struggled with financial modeling, he would sometimes stay late with me, drawing diagrams on whiteboards until the concepts clicked. He never judged me for the basic questions I asked and never made me feel stupid. He remembered details about my life that even my closest friends forgot. My mother's birthday. My sister's graduation. The anniversary of my father's passing. One night, when I was about to give up on a complex valuation model that had been defeating me for days, Victor sat down beside me. He rolled up his sleeves and said, "Let us figure this out together." We worked until 3 in the morning, ordered pizza, drank cold coffee. When I finally understood something that had seemed impossible hours earlier, he said, "That is how you learn. If you avoid hard problems, they follow you. You have to wrestle with them until they surrender." When I made mistakes, and I made plenty in those early years, he did not humiliate me in front of colleagues. He pulled me aside, explained what went wrong, and helped me fix it. Once he said, "Everyone makes mistakes. The difference between good consultants and great ones is not whether they make mistakes, but whether they learn from them." I trusted him completely. I defended him when other partners complained about his demanding standards. I quoted his advice like scripture. I told everyone who would listen that he was the reason I was succeeding in this industry. That was true. But this trust would not only help me grow, it would also cause me to pay the biggest price of my life. By year 5, I had become a senior associate, one of the fastest promotions in the firm's history. My performance reviews glowed with praise. Clients requested me by name for their most important projects. Victor had been promoted to executive director, putting him in charge of the entire organizational transformation practice, a team of over 40 consultants working on complex engagements. The dynamic between us shifted in ways I did not immediately recognize. He was busier now, more distracted, always rushing between meetings or staring at his phone during conversations that used to have his full attention. He had less and less time for me. The man who once asked about my weekend plans now barely remembered my project assignments. Our weekly mentoring sessions became monthly, then quarterly, then whenever he remembered to schedule them. I told myself it was natural. People grow, relationships evolve, responsibilities expand. But something else was changing too, something I did not want to acknowledge. Victor started taking credit for work that was not entirely his. Small things at first, things that had logical explanations. A client presentation I had built from scratch became our presentation in meetings with leadership. A process improvement I designed and implemented appeared in his quarterly report without my name attached anywhere. I noticed, but I did not say anything. He was my mentor. He had given me my career. Surely he deserved some credit for developing me into the person who could produce that work. That is what I told myself. That was the story I needed to believe to keep going. Even though this situation was starting to affect my motivation and belief, that was the narrative I clung to. But the warning sign I could not ignore came during the Morrison project. I had spent 4 months redesigning their supply chain operations, working 18-hour days, missing my sister's birthday celebration, canceling plans with friends so many times they had stopped inviting me. When the final presentation day arrived, Victor pulled me aside 30 minutes before we were scheduled to present. "I am going to lead this one," he said, straightening his tie in the reflection of a window. "You can handle the cue and afterward." I blinked, certain I had misheard, but I had built the entire model, the analytics, the recommendations, everything. "I know," he replied, his tone patient but somehow condescending. "But Morrison's CEO is old school. He responds better to senior leadership. You will get your recognition internally. Trust me on this one." I watched him present my work as if he had created it himself. He used my phrases, my frameworks, my insights. The CEO shook his hand afterward and said, "Victor, this is the best strategic work I have seen in 20 years. Victor smiled warmly and said, "That is what we do at Callahan." I had no problem with we. But the name Kelly never appeared in that we. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that it blinded you to the warning signs right in front of you? I was just beginning to realize I had been living with this blindness for a long time. Did I want to believe in someone this much? Was that the reason? Or could I not afford to lose Victor's support? Was I afraid of being alone? I began to question this within myself every day. Maybe you have been there too, defending someone who stopped deserving it long ago. Even when I went home exhausted after work, I could not quiet my mind, constantly thinking about this. Things would go even further, evolving into a clear point of betrayal. The slow accumulation of small choices grew like compound interest on a debt I did not know I was accruing. Victor continued to position himself as the face of work I produced. He began to minimize my contributions in meetings with partners. He started introducing me as his assistant rather than his collaborator. And I continued to let it happen because I still could not face this truth and did not know how to cope with it. Confronting the person I had believed in for 11 years felt like betraying my own past. Then came the Henderson account. Henderson Manufacturing was the biggest client Callahan had ever pursued. A full organizational transformation worth $47 million over 3 years, touching every department, every process, every system in the company. It was the kind of project that could define entire careers, the kind partners talked about for decades. As the numbers grew, so did the ambitions, affecting the entire dynamics of the work environment. Victor was assigned as the lead, and he personally requested me as his primary analyst. I should have been proud of this recognition. Instead, something in my stomach tightened when I saw the assignment email. I could not explain the feeling. Maybe some part of me already knew what was coming. The project started smoothly enough. The framework for the work was clear. I built the diagnostic framework from scratch, designing interview protocols and assessment tools that captured data the client had never thought to track. I conducted 73 stakeholder interviews across every level of the organization, from the factory floor to the executive suite, spending weeks understanding how work actually flowed versus how the org chart said it should. I identified 12 critical inefficiencies that were costing Henderson over $8 million annually, opportunities they had been missing for years because no one had ever looked closely enough. Victor presented my findings to the client as preliminary observations from our initial discovery phase, mentioning my name exactly once, introducing me as his research support. I had no idea when I had acquired that title. Research support. 11 years of expertise, hundreds of hours of work, a framework sophisticated enough to become industry standard, all reduced to 2 words that made me sound like an intern. But I kept working. I kept delivering. I kept believing that eventually the quality of my work would speak for itself. Excellence is its own reward, Victor had taught me. I was about to learn how wrong that philosophy could be. The turning point came 6 months into the engagement. Henderson's CFO, a sharp-eyed woman named Pamela Vernon who missed nothing and forgot less, started asking pointed questions about implementation timelines. This was because Victor had promised aggressive, unrealistic targets during the sales process. Yes, these promises had sounded impressive in pitch meetings, but they had never been vetted by the people who would actually have to deliver them. When I ran the numbers carefully, I realized we were behind schedule by at least 8 weeks. Victor had made a mistake that could cause a major loss. I brought this to Victor immediately, staying late to prepare a detailed briefing document that laid out the situation clearly. I proposed 3 potential paths forward with all the details. We need to reset expectations with the client, I said, handing him the document across his desk. The current timeline is not achievable without significant additional resources or scope reduction. We should get ahead of this conversation rather than letting them discover it themselves. Victor's face hardened as he flipped through the pages without really reading them. We are not telling them that. His voice was flat, final. Why not? I was genuinely confused by his resistance. They deserve to know where the project actually stands. Transparency builds trust in the long run. Because, he said, tossing the briefing onto his desk dismissively, I already committed to the board that we would hit the original dates. If we walk that back now, it makes me look like I do not know what I am doing. It undermines my credibility with the partnership. That was your decision to make alone, without consulting the delivery team? He leaned forward, and for the first time in 11 years, I saw something cold and unfamiliar behind his eyes. I was witnessing this side of him for the first time. The air conditioning hummed. Someone's phone buzzed in the distance. The office felt smaller than it ever had. It was my decision because I am the executive director on this account, Kelly. Your job is to make my commitments work, not question them. If you cannot handle that level of responsibility, maybe this project is not the right fit for your skill set. For the first time in 11 years, I had heard something so unfair and devastating from Victor. The mentor I had trusted was no longer interested in teaching me or developing my career. He was only interested in using me as a resource. I did not withdraw from the project. I had invested too much effort and knew the subject matter, but I understood very clearly who would be blamed if things went wrong. That night, I went home and started documenting everything. Professional trust is strange, do you not think? We give it freely to people who seem worthy, based on their titles, their tenure, and the stories they tell about themselves. And then we are shocked when they misuse it, when the person we believed in turns out to be someone entirely different. But maybe the real lesson is not about trusting less. Maybe it is about trusting smarter. Even though I had not done this for 11 years, the time had come. Trusting smarter meant documenting. Documents that I would never have to use if things went well. Documents whose existence I might even forget. I saved every email where Victor made promises to clients without consulting the team that would have to deliver on those promises. I kept detailed records of every meeting where he took credit for work I had produced, noting dates, attendees, and exact phrases used. I documented every instance where he changed project parameters without informing the analysts who would have to execute those changes, which meant we were scrambling to explain delays that were not our fault. I was not planning revenge. I was not even thinking that far ahead. I was planning survival. I had seen what happened to people who challenged Victor without evidence to support their claims. 3 years earlier, a senior associate named Derek Okonkwo had raised concerns about Victor's management style in a partners' meeting. Derek was talented, well-liked by colleagues, respected by clients who praised his thoroughness and insight. Within 6 months, he was completely gone from the firm. Performance issues, they said officially in the announcement email. Everyone knew the real reason. Victor had systematically dismantled Derek's reputation after that meeting, questioning his work publicly in team gatherings, copying partners on minor errors that would normally be handled quietly, creating a narrative of incompetence that did not match reality, but became reality through repetition and authority. I thought about how I had defended my mentor to others even though I had seen this, how I had been complicit in the crime. Maybe that was the reason I was now in a similar situation. My turn had come. By month 8 of the Henderson project, things were falling apart in ways that could no longer be hidden no matter how carefully the status reports were worded. We were now 12 weeks behind schedule, the gap widening every week despite the team working themselves to exhaustion. 3 key deliverables had failed quality review because they had been rushed to meet artificial deadlines that Victor had promised without understanding what they required. 2 senior analysts had requested transfers to other projects, citing burnout and impossible expectations in their conversations with HR. The client was losing confidence with each passing status meeting, and Victor was losing control of the narrative he had built. He started working even longer hours himself, snapping at junior staff for minor mistakes, holding closed-door meetings with the partners that I was not invited to despite being the primary analyst on the account. The tension in the office became palpable. I started waking up at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, running scenarios in my head. People stopped making eye contact in the hallways near Victor's corner office. I knew something was coming. I could feel it in the way conversations stopped when I walked into rooms, in the weighted glances exchanged between colleagues who knew more than they were saying. I just did not know how bad it would be. The client presentation meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in early September. All 25 members of the Henderson transformation team were required to attend, crowded into Callahan's largest conference room with its long mahogany table and walls lined with projection screens. Just seeing this crowd made me uneasy. Victor was there in his best suit, along with 2 other executive directors and 3 managing partners from Callahan's leadership team. Pamela Vernon would be joining virtually from Henderson's headquarters, her face appearing on the main screen at precisely 9 o'clock. Victor asked me to prepare the status update slides the day before the meeting. I worked on them until midnight, making sure every metric was accurate, every timeline honest, every risk properly flagged with appropriate color coding. If we were going to have a difficult conversation with the client about where the project really stood, Better to have it based on truth than continue building on a foundation of optimism that did not match reality. When I sent the completed deck to Victor for review at 11:47 that night, he replied within minutes with a single line. Too negative. Fix it. I called him immediately, my heart already sinking because I knew what that message meant. Victor, these numbers are accurate. They are based on actual progress data from every workstream lead. If we present inflated progress to the client, we are setting ourselves up for an even worse conversation later when reality catches up. He hung up without responding. I sat in my dark apartment for a long time, staring at my Microsoft Surface, looking at the last email Victor had sent. I felt completely lost. Victor seemed determined to leave me no way out, but what he had done and what he was forcing me into conflicted with my logic and my entire work ethic. I knew exactly what would happen next, because I knew my former mentor very well. At 6:03 in the morning, I received the revised deck in my inbox. Victor had changed 14 slides throughout the presentation. Completion percentages were inflated by 20 to 30% across every workstream. Risk assessments had been softened from red and amber to amber and green. Timeline projections had been adjusted to show we were on track when we clearly, demonstrably were not by any honest measure. And at the bottom of the title slide, in smaller text that most people would overlook, my name was listed as the sole author of the presentation. I forwarded both versions to my personal email immediately, creating a time-stamped record that could not be altered or deleted from the company servers. Then I made a decision that would change everything about my career and my life. I printed both versions and brought them to the meeting. The important moment had arrived. That Wednesday morning, standing in that conference room, I knew my mentor was about to make me the scapegoat for his own failures. Have you ever been in this situation? Have you ever felt that you could no longer turn your back on the person you trusted most? I felt the weight of 25 pairs of eyes. Every instinct screamed at me to stay quiet. Every value I held told me to speak. I had a choice to make. I could accept the blame being placed on my shoulders and hope to survive the aftermath. Or I could stand up and risk everything by telling the truth to a room full of senior leaders and a client who had entrusted us with a $47 million transformation. Give up or fight. In a movie scene, those words sound so much lighter and easier. My hands were sweating, my mouth was dry. The conference room filled quickly, people finding seats along the table and against the walls. I sat near the back with my folder heavy in my lap, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat and temples. Victor stood at the front of the room, projecting confidence he did not deserve, greeting partners with firm handshakes and easy smiles. Pamela Vernon appeared on the screen promptly at 9, her expression carefully neutral. When the presentation began, Victor moved through the slides smoothly, his voice steady and assured. He spoke about progress and momentum and strategic alignment. He highlighted wins that were real but small, making them sound transformative. He minimized challenges, framing delays as minor course corrections. He tried to make the Henderson project seem like a triumph in progress. Then Pamela Vernon spoke. Her voice cutting through Victor's momentum like a scalpel, she said, "Can you explain why the deliverable I received yesterday from your team shows a 43% completion rate on Phase 1 when this slide claims 71%? The room went silent. Victor did not miss a beat. His expression shifted seamlessly into thoughtful concern as he turned and looked directly at me. "Kelly, can you address that discrepancy? You prepared these slides after all." 25 heads turned in my direction. I could feel the blood draining from my face, could feel the trap closing around me exactly as Victor had designed it. If I said nothing, I would become the scapegoat for every failure on this project. If I challenged him, I would be exposing my mentor as a liar in front of the entire leadership team and a major client. Neither path led anywhere good. I stood slowly, keeping my hands steady through pure force of will, refusing to let them see me tremble. I could feel Victor's eyes on me, waiting for me to stammer, to apologize, to accept the blame he was handing me like a poisoned chalice. "Actually," I said, my voice clearer than I expected it to be, I would like to present the original slides I submitted to Victor last night at 11:47 p.m. before they were modified at 6:03 this morning without my knowledge or consent. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor's face went pale, then flushed red from his collar to his hairline. "Kelly," he said, a warning edge sharpening his tone. "This is not the time for this kind of discussion." "I think it is exactly the time," I replied, meeting his eyes without flinching. I pulled the printed slides from my folder and handed them to the managing partner nearest to me. "These are the accurate metrics I submitted last night," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. 43% completion on Phase 1, exactly matching what the client received independently. 61% on Phase 2, significant risk factors flagged on 3 of our 5 work streams. The timeline shows we are 12 weeks behind the original projections, which were set without consultation from the delivery team. Victor's voice turned sharp and commanding, the tone he used when junior analysts questioned his decisions. "Those numbers were not finalized. They were preliminary drafts that should never have been sent to the client. You should not have submitted preliminary work without my approval. They were accurate then, and they remain accurate now," I corrected calmly. "The preliminary designation you are referencing does not appear anywhere in my original file or in the email I sent you. I have the metadata to prove authorship and the timestamp to prove submission sequence. Your revisions arrived this morning at 6:03 with my name listed as author, despite the fact that I never approved those changes." Pamela Vernon leaned forward on the video screen, her eyes narrowing with the focus of someone detecting inconsistencies. "Miss Pemberton, are you saying that the presentation we just watched contained data that was altered from your original submission without your knowledge?" I met her eyes through the camera. What I was about to say would change everything. "I am saying the completion percentages, risk assessments, and timeline projections were modified after I submitted them, without my knowledge or consent, and that the original numbers I provided accurately reflected the project's actual status." The room erupted. The partners began conferring in hushed, urgent voices, passing my printed slides between them and comparing figures. Victor was speaking rapidly, something about miscommunication and interpretation differences, and the normal iterative process of presentation development. But I was not listening to him anymore. I was watching the faces of the 25 team members who had witnessed everything unfold. Some looked shocked by what they had just seen. Some looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted. A few met my eyes with something like gratitude, like they had been waiting months for someone to finally tell the truth out loud in a room where it mattered. After the meeting collapsed into emergency sessions, I returned to my desk and compiled my documentation file. Every email chain. Every revised slide with originals attached. 11 years of betrayals, organized into a narrative that could not be denied. That evening, I received a calendar invite from the managing partners. "Conference Room B, tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. Sometimes the people who teach us the most are the ones who show us exactly who we do not want to become." Victor taught me consulting, but he also taught me that trust without boundaries is just vulnerability waiting to be exploited. If you have learned a hard lesson from someone you looked up to, drop a comment below. The client meeting turned into emergency sessions. The meeting with the partners lasted 3 hours. I presented everything I had compiled over those 8 months. Not with anger, not with vindication, just with facts arranged in chronological order that told a story no reasonable person could deny. The email chains showing Victor's pattern of taking credit for subordinates' work going back years. The documentation of his unilateral client commitments made without consulting delivery teams. The evidence of systematic pressure on analysts to produce favorable numbers, including names, dates, and specific phrases used. When I finished, Jeffrey Aldrin, the most senior partner who had been with Callahan for over 2 decades, removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "How long have you been aware of these issues?" he asked. "I became concerned approximately 18 months ago," I replied. "I began systematic documentation 8 months ago. Why did you not come to us sooner?" "Because Victor was my mentor for 11 years, because I wanted to believe there was an explanation, because I was afraid that without concrete evidence, I would end up like Derek Okonkwo. Jeffrey's expression shifted visibly at Derek's name. "You knew about what happened to Derek?" "I knew enough," I replied. The meeting was adjourned with instructions for paid leave while they conducted their investigation. I went home to my apartment in Hell's Kitchen and sat watching the sunset over the Hudson paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel victorious. I felt exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. 11 years of trust, shattered. 11 years of professional relationship, exposed as fundamentally one-sided. The mentor who had shaped my career had never seen me as a colleague or even as a person with her own ambitions. He had seen me as a resource. I deleted Victor's number from my phone that night. It felt like removing a splinter that had been there for years. The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, Victor told everyone I had fabricated evidence. But 25 witnesses, time-stamped emails, and metadata proving authorship told an undeniable story. By the end of the 6th week, Victor Ashworth was no longer employed at Callahan Partners. The official announcement cited strategic restructuring. The aftermath was not immediate redemption. It never is in real life, no matter what the stories suggest. Callahan offered my position back with a promotion to executive director, essentially Victor's old job with better terms. I declined without hesitation. The walls of that office held too many memories. I needed a clean start. I needed to rebuild on my own terms. The call came from Pendleton and Associates in late September. Their managing partner, Catherine Reeves, had heard about Henderson through industry channels. We met at a cafe near Union Square. She said, "I am not interested in the drama. I am interested in the documentation. The fact that you built a methodical case instead of reacting emotionally tells me everything about how you think." She offered senior partner leading their transformation practice, 40% higher salary, 2 levels above my previous title. More importantly, she offered visibility, credit, and a seat at the table. I accepted. My first day at Pendleton was a Monday in November. The office occupied 3 floors of a building near Bryant Park. Catherine introduced me to the leadership team that morning. She said, "This is Kelly Pemberton. She earned this through exceptional work and exceptional integrity." No one in that room knew the full story behind those words. They did not need to. What mattered was that I knew what I had survived. The last time I saw Victor was at an industry conference 8 months later. He looked diminished, smaller than I remembered. He walked over hesitantly. "Kelly, I heard you are doing well. Congratulations." "I am doing well." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Part of me wanted to ask if he ever regretted what he did, but I already knew the answer would not change anything. I nodded and walked away. I had a panel discussion to prepare for. I was one of the keynote speakers. If you have been betrayed by someone you trusted professionally, if you have had a mentor who took more than they gave, I want you to know something. You are not alone. Trusting people is not weakness. Trusting them without limits is weakness. You do not have to learn this difference the hard way like I did. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full red file playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.